Hello and welcome back to Puck on the Parkway, folks. It is officially off season in the NHL. Last night, the NHL season concluded in dramatic fashion with the Florida Panthers beating the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games for the first Stanley Cup in their franchise history, which means it's all eyes on the off season. It's all eyes on the break in play until October when we welcome our New Jersey Devils back into play for the 2024-25 season. And it's been busy this week and already in the offseason for the Devils. They've hired a new coach. They've gone out and gotten a new star goaltender that we are going to be talking about. But first, let's welcome our other host. It is Daniel Rebane, who has just started officially writing for the New Jersey Devils on behalf of Bad Dog Sports. Daniel, how you doing, my brother?
Hey, thanks for including that. Hey man, we're here. We're finally in the off season. Shout out to the Florida Panthers for getting it done. I mean, a lot of people thought they were gonna choke. I mean, you were
I
one of
did.
them. Yep, you were
I
one of
did.
them. A lot of
They
a
looked like
lot
they
of
were going to.
a lot of people at Red Bull Arena when we were talking in the media were all on the Oilers. Me, I was still on my pick. I said it, Florida in 7, and my prediction came true. So shout out to them, their first Stanley Cup in franchise history, and hopefully they enjoy it. It's going to be a great summer down in Miami and South Florida.
Well, they certainly deserved it. I thought they were the best team all year long, certainly the best team in the playoffs, except for games 4 through 6 of the Stanley Cup. I'm not sure what went wrong for them, but congrats. Hats off. But we got to center the focus back on the Garden State. That's the purpose of this show. And there's a lot to talk about, really. I know sometimes you think you're more important than you really are in the offseason, but the Devils are here and now, folks. They really are. They were last year. This year was a fluke, and they've addressed the elephant in the room. There's a goaltender that you can stick between the pipes in New Jersey now, and you know you're going to get a good performance. Jacob Markstrom, formerly of the Vancouver Canucks and most recently of the Calgary Flames, is the goaltender for the New Jersey Devils for the next 2 years, it seems. And they've got him in at 31.25% salary retained. They sent Kevin Ball and a 2025 first round pick that is top 10 protected the other way. They've given a little to get a lot, and they get a 34-year-old goaltender who just spent last year as fifth in goals saved above expected among starting goaltenders. And he's a guy that they could really rely on between the pipes. Hallelujah. We've got a goalie in Jersey, Dan.
I mean, when this came across the airwaves, across the X, across
You can just
Twitter,
call it
whatever
Twitter sphere.
whatever you want to call it, when it came across that Markstrom was actually officially going to New Jersey, I mean, it was a breath of fresh air. It was, stress off my shoulders. I could finally move on. I don't have to think about who the Devils are trading for in goal. The Devils finally got their goalie, and you know what? Adding him to Jake Allen, in the net next year, and maybe for the next 2 years with Jake Allen there. I'm happy. I'm happy with the return that we actually gave up. 2025 first round pick that we all expect is probably going to be in the mid 20s next year, and a third pair of defensemen on our team, at least Kevin Ball, who he kind of didn't live up to his potential in Jersey. Maybe he does over in Calgary. I think they're going to set him up for success out there. So, good luck to him out there. But for the Devils, I mean, personally, with retained salary on Markstrom, you're only counting on the Devils books for what 4.125 million for the next 2 seasons. I think it's a steal. I think it's a slam dunk trade. We'll just see. Markstrom is a bit old, but a 35-year-old goaltender just won the Stanley Cup, so I'm
Well,
I'm I'm all for this.
the one downside that I will bring up in Jacob Markstrom is that it is a stopgap solution. He's only contracted for 2 years, but between the years 34, 36, I think for a goaltender, that's generally not as big of a risk as it would be for a skater.
Mhm.
Goaltenders tend to
Yep.
bloom later. Corey Schneider did bring up on NHL Network, though, that some of the bigger goalies don't last as long as some of the smaller guys. And Markstrom's a big guy. Pretty sure
Mhm.
he's
Yep.
6'6",
Yep.
I want to say. So maybe there's an expectation that his body won't stand the test of time as long as a goalie like Sergei Bobrovsky, who's more reactive based than he is position based. Actually, that's not even entirely true. I mean, Bobrovsky squares up to the puck better than most goalies in the league, but that's regardless. The point I will make about Markstrom is that they've got him and Allen for under 8 million AAV. That's a pretty good duo to have for a couple years, even if you can say that Markstrom won't be as good now as he was before. So I love this move. It's a slam dunk for me. It makes so much sense. It addresses a major need, and it was only a matter of time, really.
Yeah.
Markstrom was the guy the Devils identified before the trade deadline, and they got it done. Linus Ullmark gets traded to the Ottawa Senators for, I mean, a pretty decent amount of stuff. It seemed like while maybe he was undervalued by Ottawa in the trade, they gave Boston ended up receiving less for for what they gave up compared to what New Jersey gets for Markstrom. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, they gave up less because one, Olmark's not going with a an extension. He can easily say, "I'm going to go test free agency after 1 year." Um, yeah, Boston takes on Korpisalo's deal, 25% retained, so it's only going to cost them 3 mil. But I mean, once I feel like they needed to make this Olmark trade like before the Devils made their trade for Markstrom, and then they probably would have gotten more value. But once the Devils were off the market, who else was really trading for goalies? I mean, Detroit possibly might be trading for a goalie. There's rumors about John Gibson potentially from Anaheim today, going out to Detroit. Maybe that happens, but what other teams are trading for goalies? I said it all along that once you got to the offseason, goalies were gonna cost like the cost for a goalie was gonna be much cheaper just because there was a lot more goalies on the market available for trade. And maybe Calgary fumbled the bag. There was probably a stronger offer from the Devils at the deadline that they could have gotten if they wanted to retain salary. And they didn't. And they only get a first round pick in 2025 and a defense prospect who's 23. So that's on them. For Boston, they had to do what they had to do because they weren't going to get much out of Omar after 1 year. He was going to test free agency. So Ottawa takes that risk, and we'll see what happens with Ottawa going forward.
Well, as for the Devils, they send Kevin Ball the other way. He's been a pretty big part of the team of the D core for the past couple of years. So I want to talk a little bit about what his moving on might mean. It clearly opens up a spot on the blue line for the Devils, and I think that's something that excites a lot of fans with 16 million in cap space to use or thereabouts, and a few blue line spots opening up. I think we're going to talk about one defenseman that looks a lot like he's going to join the Devils, which has really surprised me. Like I know we mentioned it kind of uh, hypothetically and hopefully a few days ago when we last spoke that maybe I'll just say his name, Brett Pesce, could be a New Jersey Devil. And I was like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, now we're seeing it and I'm starting to believe it.
Yeah.
So with Kevin Ball gone, Brett Pesce doesn't for me seem like a like for like replacement. The Devils
No.
are going to have to get, in addition to him, perhaps if they do,
Yeah.
another body on the blue line because that's what Kevin Ball was supposed to be. He wasn't always the physical presence, but at 6'7", I think he was a monster of a guy. They need to fill that profile, and they need to do it this summer.
Yeah, we'll just keep this, segment strictly to Ball, and we'll get the Pesci
Yes.
soon. But, you know, when the Devils got Ball in the trade for Taylor Hall all those years back, I think, you know, Devils fans were like, yes, we finally got our tall, big physical defenseman that's gonna, play different than the other guys that we had around him. And you know what? Standing 6'6", 230 pounds, whatever he is, he didn't live up to that. He seemed like he would play smaller than his actual size. He wouldn't be throwing these checks. Once in a while, he'd actually, hit someone really hard, and you're like, yes, do it more. But it sometimes, it doesn't happen. Sometimes that's not how players play. We've seen it with certain forwards that are tall and big, and they don't use their body to their advantage. You know what? Ball didn't use his body to his advantage. Maybe going out to Calgary, getting more minutes, maybe he, finally turns into that type of player that we all thought he could have been. But for the past 2 years, it just wasn't coming to him. He was only getting third pair minutes. He took a lot of penalties this year. I think that was also a big part of why the Devils were okay with moving on from him. And I think now they have to target someone that's more of a veteran style of a player, shut down guy that's going to play penalty kill, play penalty kill, but lackadaisical here and there. So I think the targets are going to be Zadorov. I think you're going to see Brendan Dillon, right? Or is it DeMello? I don't know which one it was that got signed in Winnipeg. Which one got signed today? Do you know?
Today, I know.
Yeah, one
Didn't.
of the Winnipeg guys got signed. I forget which one, but yeah, one of the Winnipeg guys is a target for the Devils, and then
DeMello was signed.
DeMello. So yeah, so Brendan Dillon, Zadorov, and I think there might be one other target, but those type of big, guys that are going to clear the net, play hard minutes, physical minutes. So we'll see who else they bring in if you want to move on to Brett Pesce right now, unless you had any more on ball.
Well, what I will say about Kevin Ball is while he was an important player, filled an important need, they could have definitely improved in that area. And I think with this money that the Devils now have to spend, I think Tom Fitzgerald now understands the assignment. It's go for it now. They have to get the right player to fill that position. They didn't get it right on defense this year, and it cost them. Even when the team was healthy, this team was not good enough to be a playoff team. And a lot of that came down to how they played defensively in their own zone. They got caught in there too much. They didn't win a lot of corner battles, and they got outworked, really. They gave up a lot of high danger chances, and you can't do that, especially with that type of defenseman, because they didn't have a lot of other defensive guys really on that blue line besides him. So if they're going to continue that trend, which it looks like they are, especially now bringing in a guy like Brett Pesce who can play two ways pretty decently, they need to then get it really, really correct on this next guy. Jonas Siegenthaler also is going to have a pretty big bounce back year if
Yeah.
he is to be the solution, especially on the top pair. He could be a guy who gets second, third pair minutes based on his performances this year. The Devils could improve and the top pairing someone to play next to Dougie Hamilton on the right. So I think that makes for a very interesting scenario for what Brett Pesce represents as a potential New Jersey Devil. Playing on the right side, he identifies a different type of profile than the one Kevin Ball is vacating. So I think it's a competitive market for a defenseman like him. There's not a lot of guys like him. He's a player that would make any team better in the NHL. But then does that mean he's the second pairing right-handed guy? Does that then mean that there's no room for John Marino on this team with Seaman Nemec going to be a generational type of player? So for me, I don't know where the space is for him if it doesn't mean you then use John Marino as another trade. But I would love to have Brett Pesce come to the New Jersey Devils. I think they'd have to put in a competitive offer because the Devils have that money. They also have an allure that not a lot of other teams have. So I'm not sure what the price would be for him exactly. But where do you see it?
Hey man, I'm not gonna lie to you. When I saw his name start getting brought up to the Devils, I was curious. I was like, what type of player is he? What's he gonna cost? And then I found out he's from Tarrytown, New York. That's 15 minutes across the Tappan Zee Bridge from me.
Mhm.
I don't really care what it costs you. You got to bring him in, a hometown guy. He played in North Jersey growing up with his youth. You would know both those teams very well.
Played for the New
Um,
Jersey Hitmen and the Avalanche. Any youth
but
hockey parents will know that one.
but in all seriousness, yeah, he's gonna cost something for a couple of years now. He's projected, I believe, 5 or 6 years. In between, if you look at different sites, in between 5.5 and 6.5, in between there, we'll see if that's where he comes in. Maybe he takes less and come back home. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point. He's a right-handed shot. You already have Dougie Hamilton. You already have John Marino, and you already have Seaman Nemec. So who's the odd man out? Because nowadays you can say, yeah, let's move a righty over to the left, but that's not that's easier said than done nowadays. John Marino, interestingly enough, has a minor no move activating on July 1st. So maybe he's the odd man out. You can get off that 4.4 million and maybe upgrade to Brett Pesce. But yeah, Pesce's gonna be probably the second right-handed D, and then you're gonna see an eventual generational switch a couple years down between Hamilton and Nemec. I believe Nemec will take those minutes eventually, and then you'll see Hamilton be a very offensive, guided right-handed shot that we see nowadays from older guys. So I think Brett Pesce would be an excellent signing for this Devils team. He's taller, he's heavier than John Marino. And a key stat that I believe Jay Fresh brought up is he doesn't allow passes through the slot. I think he was one of the best at denying passes in the slot. I believe that's the stat. And then John Marino was one of the worst this year. So maybe that Tom Fitzgerald in the analytical department, that's the stat that they found. We'll see. Obviously, free agency starts Monday, July 1st. We'll see if Brett Pesce comes home. But what are your thoughts on him, man? And do you think is John Marino going to be on the move? Because that if all signs are pointing to Brett Pesce, the first pillar to fall would be a John Marino trade.
Well, I also think it opens up a potential discussion about some of the younger guys like Hughes and Nemec and how expensive those guys are going to be once their entry level contracts are up down the line. Is there a place to have those two defensemen on the same team as a defenseman as expensive as Dougie Hamilton? I don't know. That could mean something different for Dougie Hamilton's future a few years down the line, which makes things very difficult to think about. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I think Brett Pesce is a player you have to bring in if he's available. You have the money to do it, you do that. John Marino was awful this year, which stinks because he was such a welcome piece in 2022
So
23
good.
in the playoffs as well. Just such a reliable player, and he fit the mold of what the Devils were trying to be so well. Can play breakout passes from his own end, can skate with the best skaters in the league, and for me, he was just so versatile. Yes, I think once he took on a bigger defensive role with Ryan Graves leaving him and playing a lot of the time next to Luke Hughes, and even when Dougie was injured with Siegenthaler sometimes on the top pairing, he had to be a more physical presence and got exposed for that. I think he's a guy that I wouldn't want to move on from because I think the upside is he'd be so great at any other team he goes to if he's used properly and in a good role with a good defensive pairing next to him. Unfortunately, we saw what the move did for Ryan Graves. He had one of his worst seasons. Had the most giveaways in the National Hockey League for most of last year, with getting a pretty big money deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So while I like the prospect of bringing in Brett Pesce, and you have to do it, it makes me very upset that John Marino has to be the first domino to fall in terms of players you get rid of. Maybe you play him on the left side, but I think that would be putting him in a more difficult position than he even was this year. So I think you got to move on from him, and maybe you get another piece to add to your top six that way, because that's where the Devils need to improve, if you ask me. They have to get the right size defenseman on that left-hand side to fill in that piece, and they need to add one more scoring winger, and then I'd be satisfied with this roster. But right now, I guess Curtis McDermott is penciled in as the 6D man because they don't have another one.
Well, obviously that's not going to happen. We all know he's a forward. He won't be playing defense on the team unless, like you just
Unless they
find
go to 7.
unless you find multiple guys just injured on a given day. But yeah, I think you add a guy like Brett Pesce, and then you add a guy maybe like a Brendan Dillon for that third pair on the left side. I think that's exactly what Tom Fitzgerald's looking for. He's looking for some more size on the back end to clear the net, make things easier for the goaltender in front of him. And I think some of these guys were a bit soft in front of the net. they would get bullied in front of the net, and it made guys like Vitek Vanacek look worse than they are, because we don't think Vitek's the worst goalie in the league. He's probably an average guy, and I think he had a great season 2 years ago, and a terrible one this year, and I think that was the big change between a guy like Damon Severson and Graves versus a Nemec and Luke Hughes. So hopefully we'll see Brett Pesce come. We'll have to wait until Monday unless they trade for his rights, which we've seen before. But all signs are pointing to New Jersey with this one, so we'll keep an eye on that.
And I think that's a really good thing. The fact that the Devils are attracting this type of talent speaks to the project they're building towards. And I think there's a lot of things to like about the prospects going into October of this year. Well, let's talk about another potential acquisition the Devils could be making.
Yeah, interesting news.
This is one that surprised both of us, but this is a guy that you have kept very close eyes on, even after and before he was drafted 14th overall by the Jets in 2022. But Rutger McGroarty of Michigan University could be a New Jersey Devil, and I know that's got you very excited.
I mean, when this news was dropped, first of all, I was like, that can't be. What are we talking about? This isn't real. This is just rumors spreading around. But this news has rocked the NHL world. One of the best prospects, me personally, one of the best power forward prospects in the NHL right now is available. And I think the story basically is he wanted to go pro, like a bunch of the college kids last year that were sophomores. They went pro, and a couple of them got their first games. We know Seamus Casey decided later in the cycle to turn pro, signing his entry-level deal, and news that he'll probably start in the AHL, which that's pretty normal. I would say I think everybody kind of gets that, but for McGroarty, his situation was a bit more difficult to try to get that first game, especially with where the Jets were. They're battling for first place in the Central, and I think they eventually got that. And I think the GM and the other people in the front office just couldn't guarantee him playing time that year, and then also apparently they couldn't guarantee him a spot on the NHL roster next year. Kind of just fumbled the bag, in my opinion. There's not one better power forward prospect in the league right now, me personally, than Rutger McGroarty. Leadership, goal scoring, throw the body around. It's just overall his character is super high. His talent is super high. His skating is a bit average, but that's been getting better as well at Michigan. World Junior captain, gold medal, Team USA. Everything about him just screams, sign him right now. Guarantee you can guarantee him top 9 minutes, I believe, in Winnipeg for next year. I think easily you could put him on the top 9 for Winnipeg. I just don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't. Obviously they have other plans, and you know what? Now he's not going to be a Winnipeg Jet. He's on the open market, and there's already multiple teams trying to get him. And I think Rutger McGroarty would be a perfect New Jersey Devil. I think I've been talking about Brady Tkachuk on that second line. There, and if you can't get Brady Tkachuk, Rutger McGroarty is probably the next best guy you could get, and he's only 20, and he'll be on the ELC. So we'll see. I kind of want to ask this question: would you, if you could do a 1-for-1 swap, would you give up 10th overall for Rutger McGroarty?
I think you would. He went 14th overall 2 years ago. I think he's only matured as a player. And whenever you take a draft pick, there's no guarantee.
Nope.
I think we've seen Rutger McGroarty more than we've seen anybody who's up in contention for the 10th overall pick. I think that's value, that's bang for your buck. I think if Rutger McGroarty were the player that he is now, and he were in the top, and he were in this trade draft class,
he'd be a top 5
pick.
He
would fall to 10th?
He'd be a top 5 pick.
So then I think you answered your own question there.
Yeah, I mean, easy for me. For me, it's an easy like if that's what Winnipeg wants, because they also don't have a first round pick, and rumors are they would want to get back into that first round. That sounds like a fair. That sounds like
It's and
a fair deal, to be honest.
according to Elliot Friedman, Rutger McGroarty will be traded before the draft. So
Exactly as well.
I
Yep.
think there's a reason for that, and it's that Winnipeg wants to have their own choice for a draft pick in that first round. So maybe this is something the Devils entertain. I think Tom Fitzgerald, this would fit with a need in terms of the forward core, but you think he can get top 9 minutes right off the get?
I think you plug him in right next to Jack Hughes, and then you're able with his ELC for 3 years. You're able to go out and potentially sign or trade for a top line goal scorer that's making 6-7 million. It doesn't really hurt you as much as if you didn't have another ELC guy in the lineup. I just feel like his value right now for this team, like for the Devils, he can grow with the team, and his contract is just under $1 million. I think it'd be a perfect. I think it's one of the more perfect fits for Rutger McGroarty around the league. Other fits would be like Chicago, but like what Chicago's not really doing. They're rebuilding. Obviously, he's 20. He'd be able to grow with a guy like Connor Bedard. But I think you put him on that Devils roster, I think he's one of the guys you're missing. Like him and Timo Meyer could be those two power forwards in the top six going forward. I think he could easily be a 30 goal scorer. I think he could easily put up 70 points. And I think he could easily lead your team with 200 hits. I think he's that type of guy. I think his leadership will only grow. I mean, he's been a captain at every single level. Once he goes back to Michigan, I forget if captain went back, but he would have been the next guy up. He would have been a captain at Michigan next year. So I think this would be a slam dunk get for New Jersey. Depending on what they give up, I'm willing to give up 10th overall to get Rutger McGroarty.
Is it more of a question that the Devils, Tom Fitzgerald, won't be willing to give up the 10th, or do you think the Jets will want more?
I think the question is that they might try to like package Rutger McGroarty with Nikolai Ehlers to try to get a bigger package overall to add to their draft picks, like get that first round pick plus maybe like a roster player or two to because they're also trying to win now. Like the Jets are a really good team. Like they were eliminated in the first round by a really good team in Colorado. But I mean, they're trying to win now, so maybe they're trying to get that first round pick plus a player or two that they can add to their roster. Now, we'll just have to see. I mean, the draft is only what Wednesday. There's only 2 days in between the draft and now, so we'll have to see. Trade could be coming like any second now. A trade could happen by the time this video comes out, so we'll see.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not. But those are the two scenarios. Either he gets traded by himself or he'll get traded in a package with a guy like Nikolai Ehlers. So we'll have to see what happens. But I mean, I take Nikolai Ehlers too. I'd put him with
Yeah,
Jack.
that
Like
fills in
I
the
feel
scoring winger need.
I feel like I think those are the two guys you could literally just plug in right next to Jack Hughes next year. So we'll see. Maybe he doesn't even get traded to New Jersey, but I'd be all over it.
I
No,
think I,
just a
I think it.
little Michigan bias, but
Well, look, even if it is biased and he's not a 70-point guy and he's a 50-point guy, plug and play into the third line, I think that's a pretty good get for a 20-year-old who can grow into the role. So
yeah.
I like the prospects of this. And look, a guy named Rucker playing in New Jersey wearing red that only fulfills some sort of stars aligning type destiny. So that's a great omen.
Also, like, who wouldn't want a good old Nebraska boy? Like, bring a Nebraska boy to New Jersey. Like, come on,
Little
man.
Cornhusker.
I think he fits perfectly into our culture we're trying to build. So, come on,
Yeah.
Tom. Bring in Rucker to Rutgers.
Well, then let's do it. I think that's all the time we have for this episode of Puck on the Parkway. The Devils have a goalie. Marky's better. We brought in Jacob Markstrom.
Yes,
We've got a
sir.
chance to say, hey, having a goaltender that good gives you a chance to win a game every single night.
Yep.
So that is 100% a good thing for this team. They lose Kevin Ball and a 2025 first rounder, but I don't think it's that much to fret over. Brett Pesce could be coming in, and so could Rutger McGroarty. We'll have to keep our eyes open. But for now, I think it's all eyes towards the NHL draft, really. And that's what we're going to be talking about next. So stick around on Puck on the Parkway, and you'll learn about some of the Devils' prospective picks for this coming draft. But for now, I've been James Burley. That's Daniel Rebane. Thank you for joining us, folks.